Hi, everyone. I'm Pradeep Sekar. I'm a managing director with Optiv Security. We are a global cybersecurity solutions provider based headquartered in the US, in Denver. And we have operations and presence in the US, Canada, and India, right? While physically we might be located across these countries, our geographical reach is across the globe, right? So we serve more than 2,000 plus clients across different countries, geographies, because of our primary, I would say, parent, which is Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts, right? So we're owned by KKR, and as part of that particular network, we do have that interaction across each of the portfolio companies that they are working with as well. In addition to that, we also consult for organizations. We provide advisory services, we provide deployment services, as well as we help operate the cyber programs as well. Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because year over year, we are asked predictions on what the next year is going to be in terms of the volume of cyber attacks as well as the intensity of it, right? So, and year over year, we see pretty much cyber attacks still continuing to evolve. Threat actors are becoming more and more sophisticated. They're becoming more and more daring, right? As well as we see threat actors, as well as what we've been seeing in terms of geopolitical ramifications because of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, and the potential fallouts that could come out of it as well. So that's something the whole of the cyber industry is looking at as well, right? So what we see that changes year over year is just the type of attacks, right? So what is currently one of the major trends typically changes the following year, right? For example, ransomware is something that seems to be an evergreen threat actor, if you will, right? Or threat scenario, threat technique, if you will. The reason being every single industry, as they open to more and more digital transformations, we see them, more organizations, more consumers, more people getting digitally proficient, right? And what that's enabling them to do is having more of these devices, personal devices, as well as corporate devices getting connected to the internet, right? So at the end of the day, what we look at is how we are looking at from a cyber hygiene point of view. And this element, this additional threat vector, is what each of the different threat actors are looking at in order to exploit and gain an undue advantage into the organizational. So this is something that we are seeing, right? And like you rightly said, yes, cyber attacks seem to be increasing every single day, right? But surprisingly, one of the things that does not get talked about that much is the aspect of people, right? There's a dearth of skilled cybersecurity talent in the industry. So globally, there are around 3.5 million unfilled positions in cyber. And in India alone, that number is around 1.5 million, right? And these are unfilled job positions. And a recent survey study that we conducted in this year, almost 60% of organizations in India agreed that they have unfilled cyber positions within their organization. So this is a never-ending problem, right? And we're at least seeing organizations starting to slowly recruit, hire, or train, if you will, right? And this is where I think most of the cybersecurity organizations, as well as Optiv, find a major area wherein we can play a role in, right? So we have skilled staff, proficient in being able to advise our clients, proficient in being able to deploy the necessary security solutions, as well as being the preferred vendor for operating our client cyber program. So I believe this is an area that cyber firms could play a huge role in terms of helping, assisting organizations to be more cyber resilient and ready when threats do come knocking at your door. That's a great question, right? And that's pretty timely as well, because this is something that we've been eagerly looking forward to. Because when you look at Europe with this GDPR, we know US is also lagging behind, but there is talks of coming up with a federal privacy protection framework or a law, if you will. While there is the California Consumer Protection Act, CCPA, which is modeled predominantly around GDPR, but at least we've seen organizations, we've seen countries around the globe waking up to the fact of how to keep their citizens' data private and ensuring privacy controls are in place, right? So it was, I would say it was a long time coming for India to come up with its own bill as well, right? And we know the personal data protection bill 2019, we were hoping a change of that would eventually be enforced, but unfortunately, given the huge number of comments that came in both from the parliamentary committee as well as via the public consultation, due to the volume of changes, the government withdrew that particular bill, right? And they came up with this digital personal data protection bill. And right now, I know there's a public comment that's going on, period for public consultation, if you will. So there are certain good things from it, but there are still certain concerns from that particular bill, right? Wherein there's still scope for how we can expand the ambit of ensuring the right to privacy, which is what the primary driver behind this whole bill, if you will. And when we look at the key players, right? Organizations or people that are handling personal data of citizens and users. And that's where it comes into the context of data fiduciaries and data processors, right? So people who are basically holding the data that is not theirs, right? Your data and my data, our personal data, we'll be the data principals, right? Because it's our data. But when you look at data fiduciaries as well as the data processors, they're the ones who hold our data. Either they received it from us or they received it through a third party, but they are using that processing for a different means, right? Now, the whole aspect of the business of data centers, right, and data services, because it is very restrictive. And when you look at the fines that is in play today, that's recommended by the government in this bill, you can see fines of up to 200 crores, 250 crores, or even a max of 500 crores in INR that would be levied as determined by the Data Protection Board of India, which is again recommendation put forth in that particular bill. We see it being super restrictive on commercial enterprises, which is in the business of data services, right? And that's where it could be super restrictive, and we are seeing organizations looking at how to navigate this particular aspect. Because if you look at it, states and central agencies, they're exempt from this, right? So the onus is pretty much on the commercial organizations, which is currently running the data centers, which is processing the data on behalf of other companies, maybe, or even that they have on their own as well, right? So, it's definitely, I would say, something we need to watch for, especially technology organizations which have huge data centers already in India, and they're eagerly awaiting what's going to come next as an evolution of this particular bill. But there is still some, I would say, from my point of view, I would say there's still some aspects that the government could better in terms of what should go into the bill, right? For example, right now, if you look at it, it does not include a time limit, right? While it says if there is a personal data breach, if there's a data breach, that particular organization which is holding the data should notify not only the Data Protection Board of India, but also every single consumer impacted by that breach. But what is missing right now is the time limit, right? By when should you notify? So that was one thing. Another major thing that we found when we were perusing the bill was the scope, the ambit of data, right? Right now, it covers only digital data. Whereas if you look at the personal data protection bill that was there earlier, 2019, that include any forms of data, right? Whether it's manual or digital. So right now, this is very clear cut in terms of just looking at only digital data. So if somebody is maintaining, let's say, your data registers, entering your data, that is not covered as part of this particular bill. So there are certain aspects, there are certain definitely promising features in terms of what we see in the bill, but definitely certain things that we could improve upon that, I think, as part of public consultation that we are providing to the government, as well as other individuals are providing. Hopefully, we look at what the next evolution of the bill is going to be. So we see that, so like I mentioned before, Optiv is a cyber advisory and solutions leader, right? So we provide advisory services, deployment services, as well as operate services, right? So we are an end-to-end cyber security firm, and our focus is in the areas of only cybersecurity, right? So So one of the key things that we've been seeing organizations and what we've been helping organizations with is as a preferred and trusted partner, if you will, right? So when it comes to helping them embark on their cyber journey, as we've seen during the pandemic, a lot of organizations, due to the necessity of moving to a hybrid operating model, hybrid working model, had to put in a lot of digital transformation related initiatives and projects that they started on. Now, all of these have, I would say, implications, right? So technology, we'll have to look at whether as you, let's say, come up with a new product, is it secure, right? Is it free of vulnerabilities? Because we have seen, if you look at Microsoft's Patch Tuesday, that it does, right? Every single, when they release updates on these Patch Tuesdays, it's a bunch of updates that they give as patches to their different Microsoft products, right? So software is not free of vulnerabilities. So when we adopt new solutions, new technologies, cyber is kind of enabling you to take more risks, but in a secure manner, right? And that's where I think we are focusing on as an organization when we look at organizations trying to modernize their enterprise, right? So we have a whole offering around enterprise modernization, which looks at how do we make, let's say, security assessments or evaluations more data-driven. Predominantly, we have seen our clients, organizations looking at it from a point-in-time evaluation, as in a person looking at, do I have this control or not? Yes, no, not applicable, right? It's a point in time, maybe a checklist kind of a mentality. What we are helping organizations with moving away from that model into a continuous, automated, real-time capability to be able to look at what data sources that they're already collecting. Many of these organizations have 40 plus security tools in each of their organizations, right? You could just look at the data that's coming in from these security tools. An integrated way of looking at it and bringing it into your assessment is what we're calling as a data-driven security assessment, which is, I would say, one of the big bets, along with, like I said, enterprise modernization, wherein clients are looking at leveraging technologies like AI, ML algorithms, models that they are looking at including in their business processes, as well as clients that we are working with who would want to look at what are the applications of going into the metaverse, right? How could I sell more? How could I enable selling as well as my business in the metaverse, right? So when we go in and talk to our clients, it's looking at what are the potential risks that they could face if they do embark on this journey into any of these technologies, and how we could enable them to securely leverage and exploit that opportunity, if you will. Because if you go to some of our preeminent, I would say, security conferences that security professionals gather at, whether it's the Gartner Security Conference or the RSA Conference, one of, at least in the past 2 years, one of the most commonly used terminology you would see is zero trust, right? And I'm not calling it a hype, but it is definitely a good thing in terms of looking at being able to approach it from that particular concept. But one thing that usually gets missed out is it is not a solution, right? Zero trust is not a solution. It's more of a concept. It is an architecture approach, if you will. Because we've seen a lot of technology vendors who got onto this marketing bandwagon, and they've been using and selling zero trust solutions, right? While there could be one solution that would help you focus on one aspect of the problem, zero trust is basically forcing you to look at your organization as a holistic whole, right? The whole concept, the premise is simple, right? It is trust no one, but always verify. And we see that identity is going to be at the very core of it, right? The unique identity that you and every user has, employee has, and that they use to navigate into your corporate environment, or let's say into an organization's customer facing portal. That is key in terms of what they can access and what they need to authenticate and get authorized in order to prove that they are who they claim they are. And zero trust is basically predicated on that, right? And at Optiv, we have an engineering fellow who pretty much who had authored a book on zero trust, which is featured in the recent RSA conference. And we had a panel discussion around how organizations across the world could and should be looking at implementing zero trust approaches, right? And this is something that could vary depending on the stage each of the clients are in, right? When we look at startups who are just starting off, they have the flexibility and the freedom to decide what their whole network infrastructure and technology environment should be. They have far, I would say, I wouldn't say it's an easier job, but it's relatively easier to implement those concepts from a net new architecture point of view versus, let's say, a bank that is established, which has legacy technology and a lot of technology debt. Now it's going to be a lot more challenging for them to completely make it ready for zero trust. So it depends on where the client or the organization is today, and Optiv helps them along their journey, depending on how they go from where they are today to being able to truly show that they are following the concepts as well as the principles of zero trust. So when we actually came into 2022, one of the things that we are looking at was when organizations had implemented a lot of these digital transformation projects and enable their employees to work in a hybrid operating model. Our expectation was we might see even more social engineering and phishing attacks, because now we have employees who are all remotely working, not everyone, but at least there's a mix of remote working as well as you have employees working out of offices. And while that still did materialize, we've still seen a lot of ransomware impacting organizations, right? Like you talked about, whether it was the AIMS cyber attack that happened in November, or if you look at SpiceJet that happened in May of this year. So we've seen not only in India, but across the globe, ransomware be playing a major role, right? So going into 2023, we see that it's not going to be any different, right? So ransomware is still going to continue to make headlines. And one of the key aspects that we advise organizations to also look at is maintaining a cyber hygiene, right? Being able to look at how do we secure our endpoints? How do we keep our employees trained? How do you tell them what to click and what not to click, right? Because we see a lot of clickbaits, right? And given the holiday season, we are seeing an increasing trend of if you see gift vouchers, right? Let's say you get Amazon gift card saying, hey, you got this gift card from your organization, and you might need to click on the link to basically use that and apply to your Amazon account. Now that could be clickbait, right? So this is something that has and needs a lot of, I would say, cyber training awareness from the security leadership point of view. So at Optiv, we are working on and putting together a state of cyber governance report. And we cover the entire of 2022 as part of that, right? So we have surveyed more than 500 companies, clients across the globe as part of that. We've also looked at 5,000 plus clients who have bought security solutions. And what we've done is we've crystallized that into a report, which looks at trends in 2023 that we foresee, as well as what happened in 2022, right? And we're looking at security governance as a whole. So we're looking at leadership, right? What impact does it have to an organization if there's a dedicated security leader in the form of a chief information security officer, versus it could just get reported into, let's say, a CIO, or maybe just the CEO, or even director of IT or somebody else, right? So we are seeing clear differentiators in terms of how that impacts an organization in security hygiene, the security budget that it has, the security headcount. We're also looking at which capabilities that they're strong in, right? Whether it's being able to know where your assets are. When I say assets, it's basically your technology assets. Do you have a good grasp of where they are in your environment, outside of your environment, as well as what are companies spending in terms of getting themselves protected against which the particular threats. So that's a report that we're working on and should be out in by the end of January 2023. And that's something that would be available on our website as well for our clients as well as organizations to be able to download and take a look at some of the critical findings from 2022 and what our key predictions are for going into 2023.